Since June 6th, Winnipeg audiences have had the opportunity to see the best in live theatre out at the Trappist Monastery ruins in St. Norbert. A perennial favorite, Shakespeare in the Ruins has been a mainstay of Winnipeg summers for 30 years, entertaining audiences in Shakespeare and Shakespeare-adjacent plays and allowing audiences to rejoice in the bard amid the fantastic surroundings of the ruins. This year, S.I.R. has been performing 2 plays concurrently, Shakespeare's timeless classic, A Midsummer Night's Dream, and a new work written by Canadian playwright Daniel MacDonald called Iago Speaks. Iago Speaks deals with the average Joe Schmo extra in Shakespeare, whether it be soldier number 6, nameless servant number 2, spearholder number 4, or in the case of Iago Speaks, Iago's jailer. The play breaks the fourth wall and asks questions such as, will the jailer be the protagonist to his own story? What is the point of stories, and will Iago ever break free? And joining me here in the Classic 107 studio to talk about Shakespeare in the Ruins and the run that is now on, I'm joined by cast members Arne MacPherson and Joshua Beaudry. Hello to you both. Nice to have you here.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Mm-hmm. So S.I.R. has been going on since June 6th. How have the shows been so far, and how have you been dealing with the wet weather, and what are the mosquitoes like?
It's been great. We start off with a number of high school performances, and it's a great sort of like learning ground for us because we get the feeling of live performance, but we test it on teenagers, which is a tough crowd. But they're really receptive, so that was a lot of fun. That's with Midsummer Night's Dream. And for the most part, the weather was pretty cooperative. It'd be windy occasionally.
Yeah, mostly the problem was the wind.
Yeah.
Because, of course, you're outside. You're trying to be heard, and when the wind is blowing through the leaves on the trees, it can get really, it's a real obstacle to being heard. So.
Yeah, it always feels like the wind is blowing our voices away from the audience.
It seems that way because it always is.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah,
and we've had one show canceled because of rain, so that's not bad. And then we've had some beautiful. Of course, some beautiful days as well.
Yeah, and the nice thing with S.I.R. is they have built-in rain dates. So if we get a cancellation, there's a few possibilities to add shows to make up for that. A few.
Great. Before we get to the shows, Arne, it's my understanding that you're a founding member of Shakespeare in the Ruins. Am I right about that?
Yep.
And can you briefly talk about the early days and how's the company changed over the years?
Well, yeah, it was 30 years ago. This is the 30th anniversary. So that means that I was 6 at the time. I'm joking. A bunch of us, I think there were 10 or 11 of us, got together and thought that it would be really cool to perform Romeo and Juliet in this particular site. We didn't have any money. I think we did 3 shows, and it was kind of a bit of a sensation. People who saw it just were blown away by the kind of energy that it had, and by this whole experience of moving around, promenading around to follow the play. So I think we each made $50 that year. Actually, I wasn't in that first show. I was sort of involved in organizing it, but I wasn't in that first show of Romeo and Juliet. And then we just thought, well, people seem to like this. We should do it again. And we started applying for grants so that we could pay ourselves a little bit more. But back then, the box office number was the home phone number of one of the members. There was a stage manager, but there was no crew. The actors schlepped all the props and everything. The actors washed their own costumes. And slowly over the years, it just kind of, as theaters do, kind of evolved, and now it's got a full staff, full technical crew. So it's really grown, and it's really grown up too.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You're playing Oberon and Peter Quince in Midsummer Night's Dream. First of all, for those unfamiliar with the play, who are Oberon and Peter Quince?
Well, Oberon is the king of the fairies. So there's a few subplots in Midsummer Night's Dream. Yeah. There's the fairies, there's the lovers, and there's the mechanicals. And so the fairies, the king and queen of the fairies are having a big fight, and Oberon, the king of the fairies, decides to play a really nasty trick on the queen of the fairies to get even with her. And that trick sort of sets the plot in motion, because the whole story is about people who have this magical love juice sprinkled on them while they're sleeping, and then when they wake up, they fall in love with someone they shouldn't be in love with. And in the Queen's case, the Queen of the Fairies, Titania, in her case, she falls in love with Bottom, who Josh plays, who's one of the mechanicals, but he has been transformed into a half man, half donkey by one of the fairies, by one of the more mischievous fairies.
Yeah. So, and Peter Quince is one of the mechanicals, right? He's
Yeah.
sort
So-
of the side.
Yeah, the mechanicals are a bunch of sort of like rustic workers who are gathered together to rehearse a play, which they're hoping to perform when the Duke gets married. And Peter Quince is kind of the writer and the producer of this little troupe of idiots, and Bottom is the star. He's the best actor, and he knows it.
I got to ask the question, how does it work in regards to costume changes between Oberon and Peter Quince? And do you ever give the audience like a knowing nod to the fact that you're playing both characters?
Yeah, the play kind of starts with this tickle trunk moment where the actors all walk on sort of in their basic costumes, and then they open up this trunk and they find things and they start putting them on. So there's no attempt to hide any of that from the audience.
Yeah.
And so that's Arne playing Oberon and Peter Quince. And Joshua, you're here, and am I right? Is this your first time in Winnipeg?
This is, yes.
Performing in Winnipeg?
My first time performing in Winnipeg, yeah. Very excited about it. I've seen Shakespeare in the Ruins before. A number of years ago, I saw Taming of the Shrew, directed by Arne's wife, and my cousin was acting in it. So it was very nice to join this company that I'm somewhat familiar with. Yeah.
You're a well-respected comedic actor, which works well for the character of Bottom, which you're playing in A Midsummer Night's Dream. But then you are also playing the polar opposite character, Aegeus, in Midsummer as well. Can you describe to our listeners who Bottom and Aegeus are?
Okay, Aegeus is a high-strung father whose daughter Hermia is, according to him, in love with the wrong person. So he would prefer her to marry Demetrius, and she's in love with Lysandra. Aegeus takes things to the extreme, and he demands that if she doesn't comply with his wishes, that she be executed. So pretty extreme father. So that's Aegeus, and Bottom is just, as Arne described, the star of his own world. He's the quintessential actor in his mind, and he'd like to play everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you relate to more?